published many books, and I'm sure most of you in the audience have read at least one of them. Her most recent novel is called Nothing's Matte, and I know we're going to be hearing a reading from that this afternoon. Erna is going to be in a conversation with Evelyn O'Callaghan, who was in the previous session, professor of West Indian literature at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill, other various kind of big shot things within the university. One of our leading scholars of Caribbean literature who specializes in Caribbean women's writing in particular. Now, we'd be happy to have Erna here under any circumstances, but we're particularly happy to have her here this year because she's here as part of a special two-event program at the festival. As many of you also may know, last year, 2017, 2 Caribbean writers won the very prestigious Windham Campbell Prizes. The Windham Campbell Prizes are a series of annual prizes that were founded by a private legacy, private bequest. They're administered out of Yale University's Beinecke Library. And every year, I think, is it 8 now? 8 writers every year, fiction, non-fiction, drama, and poetry from around the world awarded these no-strings-attached prizes. They're like Nobel Prizes in that sense. It's not for a particular book, it's for a body of work. And for writers who are still actively producing and to support their future work. So last year, Erna Brodber and Andre Alexis, who's actually here in the audience this afternoon, give him a round of applause too, were the first Caribbean winners of Windham Campbell Prizes. This year, just not that long ago, just a few weeks ago, we found out that Lorna Goodison, current Poet Laureate of Jamaica, was a 2018 Windham Campbell Prize winner. We're sorry that Lorna couldn't at the last minute be here with us at the festival, because then we would have had all 3 of the Caribbean Windham Campbell winners. But anyway, we've got 2 out of 3, so that's not too bad. So we're very, very grateful to the Windham Campbell Prizes through the administrator, Michael Kelleher, who's here in the audience, for supporting bringing Erna and Andre to our festival. Yes, let's clap. Everybody clap. Let's clap, everybody. We're very grateful for the generous support of the prizes, which has allowed us to bring these 2 writers here and to allow you to listen in on these wonderful conversations. Erna's this afternoon, Andre's on Sunday. Nothing else for me to say, except please give them one more big round of applause to welcome them, and we'll start.
Sorry, just put it on and turn it on. Yeah, just. Well, I don't think I really need to say what I already said in the previous panel about the amazing impact this lady and her work has had on my own development as a Caribbean scholar of our literature. And I've interviewed her from time to time over the many, many years that we've known each other. And I keep coming up with more and more questions, but I'm lucky today in a sense because I taught a course, a module of a course just recently on Jane and Louisa, Erna's first novel. And I said to the students, well, I have the opportunity of being able to interview Professor Brodber, so any questions that you have, you may now send them through me. So this has added to the list of topics that I'm going to raise in no particular order. And I want to start by referring to a story that I had never read before. It's called The Baby Father, published in Kunapipi in 2012. And it's told entirely from the perspective of a young man, a selfish fellow, who changes after being confronted by the child he fathered but never knew. Which reminded me once again that Erna is one of not many women writers who feature male characters in their work in a positive way. Men are very much a part of all your novels, I think. And they play one male character figure plays a crucial role in the lives of all your fictional women. There's Baba for Nellie in Jane and Louisa Will Soon Come Home, Ma Cyrus for Ella in Mayel, several others for the title character in Louisiana and The Rainmaker's Mistake. Now in Nothing's Matte, Everard and Modibe are more tangential, but still they form part of the fractal structure of the text. And so I'd like to ask you to say something about this commitment to representing men in your literary and non-literary work, because I'm thinking here of the second generation of free men in Jamaica, 1907 to 1944.
Well, one of the things I try to do in my work, you know, I'm coming out of social science, is to get to what I would like to call the truth. And if we are to deal with the truth, and the truth I've always hoped that will help us to go into applied work, then we have to have men and women, because that is how it is. There are men and there are women. But that apart, which is a sort of intellectual thing. I had a very great childhood. Much of it depends on the fact that I had a marvelous father. And I could not think of writing without paying respect to my father. I also have 3 brothers who came after me and who I had to take care of. So there is no way that the black man, the Jamaican man, would not be stamped on my thinking. There is no way I could not deal with them because I love them. They're part of me and I know they're part of life.
Absolutely. I want to talk now about the very prestigious and very generous Windham Campbell Prize for Fiction that you won. And am I right? The first, well, with Andre, the first Caribbean writers to win this since it was begun in 2013. And Lorna Goodison this year. Obviously, we're all thrilled and saying, finally, a Caribbean writer has made it onto the Windham Campbell list. But gossip now. How has this impacted on your life?
Well, I have no hesitation in telling you little things like this, which you understand, that things were so thin that I was borrowing money from my 5-year-old grandson and couldn't pay him the $7,000 that I owed him. Thanks to Windham Campbell, as soon as I got it, my grandson Anton got his money. Okay. And I would like to tell you, thank you, Michael, and anybody else who had anything to do with it, that when I get in my car now to go and do a particular work, I don't think about whether I can afford the gas. I just drive up and say, fill up with 90, please. There it is. You want more than that?
I want to know what it has meant to your writing practice.
Oh, Lord of mercy. Okay. The writing practice.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
don't know that it has done that much to my writing practice, except that I knew from you people that in the British Empire, people knew about me. But I did not know that they knew about me in America until this happened, Michael. And now I feel that I have a presence on the American continent. So I can't tell you anything more about that, except that I continue to do what I do, and thanks to the money I'm able to do it, but it's not affecting my writing style. It certainly is giving me a cushion to help me to do the things that I want to do, yes. Okay.
Well, I really wonder if any of the prize-winning jury have any idea of how much impact they make on the lives of people like Miss Brodber. Truly, I'm delighted. Let's look at the citation that they posted online. And this is what they said. Erna Brodber's uncompromising fiction weaves strands of diasporic history, memory, and identity into illuminating new forms. And what I want to ask you about is 2 of these points in particular. And the first is memory, which I think is gaining greater prominence in your work over time. I know it's part of all Caribbean writers' concerns. That so much of our past is lost, unwritten, forgotten. We were just talking about that in the archives panel. Dionne Brand has these lines in her novel, At the Full and Change of the Moon, that always haunt me. She says, I think we forget who we were. Nothing is changing, it's just that we are forgetting. All the centuries past may be one long sleep. And I think, like Brand, your work is engaged with unforgetting. Is there any other reason memory is so crucial in your fictions?
Not just my fiction, but my other work. For right now, I am reclaiming my great-grandmother, which is it's a very difficult task, but it has to be done because that lady has been in my dreams over and over and over and saying, you have to write about me. I have no choice. I have no choice. But that private. But the thing about it is that I am a black woman, and I happen to know that nobody or very few people are going to write about us in the governor's dispatches.
Right.
In order to make visible, myself visible, my great-grandmother visible, all the rest of us visible, I'm going to have to rely on somebody's memory. So I prize memory. And what I'm doing do sometimes, like now, the work that I'm doing now with my great-grandmother, is, the Bob Marley thing, me throw my corn, I grow great. So me throw out my corn, and hopefully some people pick it up and bring me the memories too, because I'm finding the memories in sort of odd places which I would not have been able to work out. Okay,
Just keep.
All right, well, I give you an example. Somebody who's, a lot of people are in this genealogy thing, and somebody very kindly, actually my nephew, kindly sent to tell me that my great-grandmother's name was, before she got married, was Johnson. I didn't know this. Nobody has ever told us this. But because he's into this thing, he discovered that. And told me also where her father had lived. So I pick up myself in my car now with my gas and go to St. Anne.
A Bimmer?
Not a Bimmer.
Oh.
Not a,
she drives the same old
don't reach
VW?
there yet.
All right.
Yeah. To find Annie Johnson. Annie Johnson, So we start where we're eating, and we say, you know any Johnsons? And this girl say, yes, man, I know a lot of Johnson. In fact, my baby father is a Johnson. And they live up so. So we drive up so, and she tell us the JP is a Johnson. We go to the JP. Well, he's not there, but his wife says that it's not him because he is too early in this place when I'm looking for people who have been there from 1899. Okay, so she sends us to somebody else, a man who keeps a bar, and he says, it's not me because I just come here, but I know somebody who's been here from a long, long time. As it turned out, he don't even name Johnson anymore, but his mother named Johnson and he made name Lewis. No, so he phones this Mr. Lewis, and I talk to Mr. Lewis, who's very hesitant to come down to talk to me, because as somebody in the shop says, nobody don't know who you are, You could be coming to come kill people. Nobody know who you are. It's a dangerous thing you're doing. So Mr. Johnson Lewis doesn't come. Then when I mention some names, he say, you're right, Yes, I know it's you. I know these people. All right, I'm coming. So he drove down, and we sat down and talked. This is what I mean, like, you throw your corn, and things work. With the result now that I'm going to, sometime in June, I'm going to go down into that village, and using my anthropological skills, I'm going to be collecting family memories in the hope that somewhere in the side of these memories, somebody have something to say about my great-grandmother, Frances Eliza Johnson.
Well, there's another story straight off for free, ladies and gentlemen, courtesy of the Bocas. Thank you very much. And the other feature in the citation I wanted to talk about is what they said about new forms. And the students told me I must ask this. Actually, it was one of the lecturers. You have been such an inventive writer in terms of form. I mean, from the dissociated consciousness case study in Jane and Louisa, fractals in Nothing's Mat, speculative fiction in Rainmaker's Mistake. How do you come up with these formal variations? And more importantly, well, I kind of know, but tell us more about the next milestone that you're treading towards, the story of your great-grandmother.
Well, I don't know about forms. As I've always told you people, I never did crit-lick or lit-crit or whatever you all to call it. So I don't know these things. And a lot of these terms that I even use to discuss my work are foreign to me, so they have no help. So
I put in my place.
Right, so I don't know about these forms. All I know is that I have a job to do, and my job is to do a certain piece of work and to make it available to other people. And as I've told people all the time, if this requires my standing on my head in the square, I will do it, because it is my business. So if it requires a new form, I go there.
But how did you, because I remember you telling me about fractals. I had never heard of fractals. How did you come up with the idea, and how did it relate to Nothing's Mat? I mean, why did that scientific term?
I gather it's mathematical. Mathematical. Okay.
How did it mathematical? How did that come into your head to link with the story of Connaught?
All right, that is a difficult one because I was doing a little bit of growing. I had written things and I said, no, I want to write this thing for myself. I want to understand these fractals. Somebody had entered into my life and had said something about Rastafari can't die because it observes the principles of fractals. Now I'm Rastafari and I need to know what was being said. So I didn't go and ask the man what he meant because I'm too shy. So I went to the computer and looked for fractals. And the blinking things were pulling me through the computer face. It was pulling me. They're hypnotic. And beautiful.
And beautiful.
Hypnotic.
It's my screensaver.
And beautiful because they're hypnotic. Yeah. And hypnotic because they're beautiful. And I just couldn't leave it alone. So I kept on going, and everybody I met, I would say, you know anything about fractals? I go to this conference, the Caribbean conference in Southampton, and I said to people, you know anything about fractals? And I met a young man who knew about fractals, and he put me on to, he told me about a book, African Fractals. Well, I sent and I got this book, African Fractals, and it opened up another new things. Then I had this friend who is a, what is this Nigerian religious thing? She's, yes, and she says, they don't listen to none of that. Fractals have to do with when you're, with divination. Okay, I've not to do that. So there is another path to it that I had to be pursuing. And I say, and then of course, I spend a lot of time, since I live in the country, I can go in all sorts of bush and look at all the trees that obey this fractal thing. And then it came to me as if say, God has designed this as the way to growth. This is what growth is about, the principle of fractals. So it became almost holy. But I said, now how will I know that I understand this thing? Write it. Usually when I write anyhow, I always use figures. I find myself doing these figures. It might be a triangle, it might be a set of triangles or whatever it is. When a diagram when I'm doing a novel, it doesn't have anything to do with the shapes necessarily, but it helps me to focus. I think that's what it does. So I said, let me use these shapes, not forward up with shapes really, and that is what I did with the shapes. And so I said, well, what I know about is family. I've studied family as a social scientist. Let me look at family. And this is secret. I went back in my life, and my father was a man who would send us down to his village, which is Blackstonedge, just so that we could know his people. One of these days, my sister and I went there, and we came back, and we had to pass our aunt's house before we go down to our house. We stopped there to tell her what we had seen in Blackstonedge, and she said, did you see Connaught? And we didn't see Connaught, and we asked, how come Connaught? She said, well, Connaught is short for cousin nothing. That is your cousin nothing. Oh, we laugh till our husband ran us out of the house. Okay. But I've always felt guilty about cousin nothing. So that book was also my attempt to pay obeisance to cousin nothing and to tell her, I'm sorry cousin nothing, I'm sorry I laughed at you. Okay. So that's how it's tied up. Okay. Mm-hmm.
I tell you. Read it. It's fabulous. Cousin nothing. Nothing's Matt. Yes. Okay. That gives me the perfect segue, since you referred to yourself as the family, since you referred to the family in terms of a sociological principle. Several reviewers have referred to Princess's family not conforming to, quote, the standard anthropological template. Now, explain to me now, because you're a sociologist, what does that mean in relation to the family?
Okay, I will talk about me and the family in this work, but I don't know what standard, whatever it is, means. So let's pass by that. Let's forget that.
Forget it then.
Let's forget that. And let us just talk then about the family. Well, Probably I should read a piece here from
That's
about
exactly
the
what
family.
I was thinking,
All right,
yes.
okay. And then I'll talk about the family.
Let me hold this while you're trying.
I think I need to tell you before I read that this girl here, who's Princess, she investigates a family and she finds a cousin who is in America, in Washington, and they keep corresponding and they become good friends. So when this cousin becomes pregnant and doesn't want her parents to know, she decides to come over to Jamaica to her cousin to have the baby, and then they will do something like the baby would be registered in her name. But what happens is that she didn't know she was having twins. Nobody knew that she was having twins. So after the first baby comes out, the doctor says, backside. What is this? And then out comes the second little baby. Little baby. One is like 8 pounds and little baby is like 3 pounds. And I keep saying that this is like, if you have a tangerine, tangerine, and you have the little baby ones upon it, this is like it. That is also a fractal set. That's a fractal set. So this big baby and the little baby, same thing, but in different sizes, is significantly fractal. Okay. So they say to her, you have been bearing this pregnancy as well. Princess, you keep this little one. So she has this little baby, which was given her by her cousin. And then she marries a doctor and produces her own baby. So it's a family now with 2 children who are brothers but are really cousins, which anybody who is Jamaican know about this kind of thing. That you cannot really say whether this is your brother or this is your cousin, because it could be anything. In fact, sometimes when you're pregnant, your parents send you go somewhere or another, and the baby arrives back and comes back as your brother or your sister. So sometimes your mother is your sister. Okay, so all sorts of things happen. All those people who study in family have problems.
Big time.
All right, so here we are now. Reading this little bit. Her son says to her, Mom, some of these people aren't even our blood relations. I'm going to stop here to say that the people come back. Her daughter is gifted in that the ancestors come back and talk to her and so on. And he's saying, these people aren't even blood relations. How come Clarice has to feel their pain? And he's right. I let him know that he's right. For Pearl, his great-grandmother is only Nothing's cousin, and that through her father. Their grandfather, Herbert's line, didn't pass through Maud and Charisse. They are not blood relations, and his question I'm eager to answer, for my children, given their circumstances, need to know the answers. And she says to him, Modibe, when our people came to this part of the world from Africa, we didn't come as blood relations. We didn't come as brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers already knowing and loving each other. We came as individuals without family and without friends, strangers in a strange place, and like all human beings needing to love and be loved. In the absence of family, we loved anyone we could find and were grateful for the love that anybody gave us. So we have a history of loving and being loved, not because we are blood relations, but because God has put us in each other's way. And we find something in each other to preserve, admire, and to care for. More than Charisse and Nothing are all people in the mat that are in the mat, and they love us, care for us, and want to be loved and cared by us. They are of family, like you and Clarice are family. Nothing is secret. When he knows the truth, he will need the explanation, Sila. But more, the little boy, my good little boy, turned to me and said, then all I can do is to help her feel and bear the pain. There and then I understood something that had been eluding me. Why would Nothing be the one to be blessed and otherwise with being able to take the shape of the bird, and not Grandma Pearl, who had a sympathetic relationship with hens, and whose death they had even taken? Simple, very simple. We feel for each other and carry each other's pain and blessing, so much so that if the designated one cannot and will not perform, we take on the task. Just so we must have cried and screamed when one of us fell beneath a lash, too weak to cry out for ourselves. And right now I'm very teary. Because it's in writing this that I understood this part of my past. That we don't have family. We have people who love each other. And it really doesn't matter whether you draw lines or you draw lines or you draw lines. So you can draw the lines of love if you want to, but it is really love. Okay.
That makes family.
It's really love that makes family. Okay.
I'll distract you then with something academic. Let's go back. No, not really. This is just going back to your 2015 interview with Petal Samuel when you referred to the term Creole. Because crucially, I have now come to understand that this term means something quite different in TNT than it means in Jamaica and possibly Guyana. But in the rest of the Anglophone Caribbean, it refers to local, Bornea, as Pluto would have said, regardless of ethnicity, racial ascription, or color. At the time of the interview, you thought that the term Creole wants to forget, this is what I'm getting to, the idea that the privileging of Creole and hybridity and syncreticity, it wants to forget where we're from and focus on what was made here in the Caribbean. And I think it's too early for that. I think, first of all, especially for the Afro people, you have to look at where you're coming from first. Do you still hold to that view?
Yes. So my work is the Afro people. Yes. Because unless, you must have heard me on this, yes, that the world is a set of saucers piled up on top of each other. Now, if you have a saucer that is skewed, turned, the whole thing will mash up. Yes. So, as far as I see it, we coming from Africa, particularly into this new world, are the skewed saucer. Now, if I don't pay attention to the skewed saucer, the whole one will mash up. Mm-hmm. So I have a responsibility to deal with Afro.
Fine. Then, I mean, we have definitely talked about this before.
Yes, okay.
And it's interesting that you continue to
I continue to feel that,
hold
and
that
I
view.
continue to do my work.
Yes.
Okay.
And
as I
it.
have told you
Yes.
about your work.
May come to
Thank
that.
God, thank God,
Thank God.
Thank God.
We will get back to that in a minute. Here's a question from the lecturer who is co-teaching Jane and Louisa with me. I'm duty-bound to ask it, so don't vex. Whether Nellie, as a millennial, would face the same issues now as your character did when Jane and Louisa was published. In other words, have things changed for young? Well, that's what I said to them. I said to them, you expect Professor Brodber to know about millennial? You know? But they insisted. So thinking back a long time to that first and to me life-changing text, do you think the problems faced by young black women now and the traumatic consequences of that race, class, gender trilogy still wield the same kind of power in Jamaica as would have affected Nellie?
I think there are changes, but basically it is the same. There are changes, and we're eating off the edge of the thing, but we haven't got to the patty middle yet.
Right.
Just the little crust. Circle, just the crust.
Yeah.
Not even the crust, the part where the fork goes so doop, 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 doop. Okay. That is the piece which we reach. We don't reach the substantive part yet.
Discouraging.
Uh-huh.
One of the students in that group, who I think I was telling you lives in the US but was born in the Caribbean and is of Guyanese and Grenadian parents, apparently presented an excellent oral report on the same novel. And what she said was that reading the novel involves recognition of community. Well, obviously, we all know that. But she said not just the part it plays in Nellie's own life, but extended to include the reader, who has to negotiate a way into the collective narrative, into the book, and having done so, joins another community, the community of readers. Have you ever thought of your readers in this way?
I am so happy to hear this.
Can you imagine?
Because I tried.
Yes.
This was part of it. As you know, this was written for my students, okay? And they are the readers. And I wanted us all into the community to be therapeuticized, yes. So I'm glad that you picked up that about the reader.
And it's a young lady who represents the Caribbean community in many ways. And I think we have about 20 minutes left, if I'm right. So, and I certainly want to open up the rest of my lucky audience to be able to talk to Professor Brodber. But
I'm my Professor Brodber, by the way.
Promote you.
Okay.
I have promoted you. And just to go on to a more, of course she's a professor. I'm the dean of the faculty.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I really hope they don't see this.
All right, thank you. I take it. All right, good night.
Okay, on a more personal note, and back to that chiding that you did to me, and still thinking about that ambivalent concept of Creole, I refer to your challenge in 1998. Do you remember 1998, Lixie?
I can't remember what it was about. It was a hurricane year.
What did we dance to? I had to Google it. Beanie Man, Buju, Red Rat, Luciano. I mean, I've forgotten, so that just shows you. Anyway, the challenge was issued several times over the years. Coming out of the story about Miss Manda and her stocious language, which revealed her as out of place and linked to multiple places at the same time. You wrote, I want to know what the Irish, the Scottish, the Welsh gave to the Creole mix, as much as I want to know what particular part of Africa is my heritage. I will solve the African riddle, but who will tell me about the others? And you asked me this several times.
Yes, I did.
Who will tell me about the others? And I resisted that call for quite a while and then considered it. And in 2015, along with two colleagues, who are one of whom is here in the room right now, we published Caribbean-Irish Connections, Interdisciplinary Public Perspectives, trying hard to tell about some of these others. And I want to end our conversation with profound thanks to you for that challenge that you've posed to me during my UWI career, all the challenges that you've posed to me during my UWI career, and what worlds you have opened up by presenting you with a copy of the book at last. Cover by Derek Walcott. And you have to sign nothing.
Well, people, it is so marvelous to have said something to somebody and it comes out as this. I don't know if anybody else here has had that experience, but please try and have that experience. So please say something. Say it.
And remember that if Ms. Brodber gives you a challenge, you have to answer it. But for now, I'm opening up the floor to questions. So if anybody would like to speak, please just grab the mic because it's being recorded for posterity.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm pleasant, surprised to be here. The interesting point about cousin nothing, is that a literary thing or that's just a fiction thing?
Was it literal? About cousin nothing?
Yeah.
My cousin nothing? She existed. I did not tell her meet her. She existed.
Oh, she did?
She existed, but I jump off from cousin nothing into several other things. Okay. Because, I couldn't tell cousin nothing's story because I really don't know. It's not her story. It's just a story I made up. That's a fiction part. But cousin nothing did exist.
Okay, because not too long ago, I had a similar experience where I was talking to my real cousin concerning another cousin, and when they mentioned certain things to me, and I said, okay, I'm a pumpkin vine. Well, you know what pumpkin vines mean, right? Like a distant,
travels, yes.
far away cousin. So I was just surprised and happy to really come across cousin nothing. So from now on, I'm referring to be cousin nothing.
Cousin nothing.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Questions? Comments? Okay.
Well, in that case, I have two spare questions. Always be prepared. So, back to the grindstone, sorry.
Okay.
All right, I'm sorry to keep sticking to nothings, Matt. It's just because I've read it the most recently and reread it again before this talk. I keep circling around and returning to this issue that's brought up in Nothing's Matt about African indentured servants in Jamaica in the 1865. Who knew about that? I remember reading Vic Reed's 1865 at school in Montego Bay, and there was no indentured Africans present in the region that he portrays in the text, or anything in my historical training, although that is pretty archaic. Please talk a little about this fascinating aspect of the
Well-
African diaspora.
Well, they came after 1838 when, the enslaved people decided that we're not working for decent people no longer, and decided to be peasants rather than wage laborers. And so the British government went to Africa and brought, but many of them were liberated Africans, because the slave trade existed in other places, and the British would liberate these Africans from the boats and ask them if they want to go to Jamaica or Guyana or wherever, and those who wanted to go went. So there are a number of liberated Africans who came, and they, and not only liberated, they actually went and asked people, do you want to go? So a place like St. Thomas, which was underdeveloped, received a great number of these liberated Africans. And they were supposed to get either their fare back, or they were supposed to get some land. So some of them actually did get land. So when you hear the Mr. Ayers people saying that people were trespassing, many of them did own land, but the papers weren't really registered. They weren't really registered, but they had the land, and they had the sentiment for the land. So, and something like, what is it that is very, very big in not Obia, it's a dance, but it's also a religious, Kumina owes its existence to a lot of these Africans who came after slavery. And they established a great deal. They were there as Africans, so they came with the real culture, which was now mixing with the Africans who had been there as enslaved people. So this, I deal with it in Mayel as well. So this St. Thomas is a very important cultural area, because the Africanisms could stick. They were with the new set of Africans who came. Yes, okay. So they were there, and from my looking at the Commission of Inquiry on the Morant Bay Rebellion, I saw people there who were Africans. Okay, so that's not fantasy. There were Africans there in the Morant Bay Rebellion, Africans who had come from Africa rather than who were enslaved people that freed.
Or the descendants of Africans.
Right, there were Africans who knew Africa.
Did this happen? Was it? I mean, I know Jamaica would have been the largest consumer of labor because of the sugar industry at that point. But did it happen in the other?
Yes,
parts
they
of the
came here
Caribbean?
as well. They came here. They came to Guyana.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Places like St. Helena, Freetown, Sierra Leone, and actually some of the villages in Trinidad are named after the places that
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Another story that needs to be told.
Well. She's here, ready to tell the story. You're not going to do it, Rhoda. Then we must sit down here and be ignorant.
Challenge her. Should she a challenge?
Yes. I'm going to talk to you afterwards. Yes, and chop off from your head.
Yes.
All right, okay. Yes.
Yeah, I think the response came from the speaker up front that the liberated Africans came to Trinidad. Mm-hmm. In particular in, some places in the South, you had the Fifth Companies. These people who were taken from Africa as free people and brought here and given land and some villages in the south of Trinidad. And these people have banded together now and call themselves the Americans. So that same history in St. Thomas is also in Trinidad as well. And the whole business about, they brought, some of them came through the southern states of America, and the whole business of hill rice, planting rice on the hills, came with these people as well.
Okay.
Just reading about that, Americans. Kelly?
Thanks. Thank you for this conversation and sharing this conversation with us. I wanted to, the interview that Evelyn quoted from by Pedro Samuels, if I remember correctly, was speaking about your activist work.
Yes.
And I wondered if you could tell us here a little bit more about your activist work and how that may or may not inform your creative writing.
The part about informing my creative writing, I'm not so sure about, except that I continue to feel that what I write has to be given back to the people. So in that sense, it's related. But my activist work, after the University of the West Indies and I parted company, I went down to my village in which I was born, and there it seemed to me that there was work to be done. I could do my teaching in the way I wanted to do it, about what I wanted to do, and there were people there who were dying to know about themselves. Okay? So I was able to, I did a lot of, what I did was, we weren't very good readers. And if we started to read a book, we very often didn't go past the preface. But what happened is that there were some very nice people at the University of the West Indies whom I'd left there. And they were willing to come down and give talks. So we developed quite a school of diaspora studies, or whatever you want to call it, because they came down and I would ask the people, what do you want to know? Miss Coops came too. I'd ask the people, what do you want to know? You know who Miss Coops is, of course. Ask the people, what do they want to know? And they would say, well, we want to know some more about Rasta, or we want to know some more about reggae, or we want to know some more about the Chinese who are here. And then I would go and I would source the people who would come down, and they're very nice, they came down. So we had, this is part of the activist work that I did. And then on one of these occasions, one of them, Swithin Wilmot, who is a historian, came down, and people wanted to know about their village and the history of their village and the history of the parish. And Swithin came down and swept them off their feet, and they were all saying, why nobody never tell us this before? Oh my God. And then I said to myself, here is your work. Now I am going to have to take over from Swithin and do the work for the village. And so I wrote Woodside Peartree Grove Post Office. That comes out of that work, and it's just not me, because we use the archives of the people, what somebody is calling the deep archives. I've learned that term from an African, the deep archives. So we first of all ask people to tell us what they know about the history of the place. And people would send to call me. I don't think you know this, and so on. And after we'd done that, some of the people, some young men and I, went to the archives in Spanish Town, and we did the work there. And it was so beautiful to watch their faces when they say a handwriting from 1870. I mean, I had this also when I taught in America and took American students to Harlem. They were also so amazed to see something written in 1870 that they could look at. So that was part of what I used, was my knowledge and my interest in history. And we also managed to find historical, what do you call them now? Places of historical interest, such as One Bobby Susan. We've been calling it One Bobby Susan, but this is an Arawak goddess, the mother of the chief god of the Tainos. So in our village there is this, but we were just calling her One Bobby Susan. But now we know that she have a name, which is, I forget it right now, but her son is Yokaho, the chief god of the Tainos. So we had all of that, and people would tell us stories about that. Then we had we had Daddy Rock, which the archives of the deep archives told us that the enslaved people used to go down to this place to talk about their own business. So we assumed that when emancipation was coming on, they would have gone down there to talk about their own business. So not only did we now keep going down to One Bobby Susan, but we now had a special ceremony where we would go down to One Bobby Susan on the eve of emancipation. We would do certain things down there, and then we'd come up to the village and do other things. So eventually, after much hard work, the government of Jamaica accepted these as part of its historical treasure. They became heritage sites. And the idea was, and still is, that with these heritage sites, we should be able to have a nice tourism product. But I'm afraid that we haven't done very well with that. Okay. So to answer your question, Kelly, this is the kind of thing that I have been doing. I have to say that I'm very tired. Because one of the things that happens is something called death. The people who were working most closely with me, 4 of them, they're dead. And the young people are not ready. So it's me one day pushing, and I don't want to dead before it finishes.
I cannot think of a better way of ending with that kind of devotion to writing the stories of the people who can't write their own, to finding the history of the people who don't know, and to passing that on to the younger generation. Thank God for Miss Brodber. And thank you, Lixie. Thank you very much. Now we can relax. But who are you saying? I will connect. So they can come and take their